Welcome back to Over the Edge podcast. Today, we have a guest who is going to inspire you and make you excited to sit down and change your life, to be excited, to make art. Let me tell you about Faith Ann Young. Faith Ann is a Los Angeles-based artist, entrepreneur, and creative director, and mother of two who creates immersive digital art and large-scale meditative fabric installations where people can reflect and connect. She's passionate about using art and technology to connect and convene communities worldwide. Faith Ann, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Paige. I'm so honored to be here.
I'm
Thanks for having me.
I'm really excited to have you here. We've got so many fun conversations on deck today, but let's start with your story a little bit. Will you tell us a little bit about your journey as an artist and how you got to where you are now?
Absolutely. It's definitely not a straight path, which, makes it much more interesting, I suppose. But out of college, I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. And so I was told by a friend, be a consultant because you'll be able to look at different industries and things of that nature. And so my first job, I ended up wearing a suit, working for this company, one of the biggest called Accenture, and put in an energy sector of all industries, finance and performance management within the energy sector, which I was always bad at math. So this was it made no sense to me whatsoever. And that was when I had my first experience right out of the bat of really having a disconnect between myself and my job, which I actually think everyone should go through that because it was such a rude awakening. And I really had to challenge myself to, because part of me too is my mom was like, you're living the American dream and this is great. And you've got a great salary and the perks are fantastic. And I found myself just really writing frenetically, these journal entries while I'm commuting to Long Island with this job where I was literally teaching women to enter their fixed assets data into a computer system. And at the end of the 3 months of doing that, we fired them. And I was like, there must be something that's not this sad. And slowly over time, I really looked at the things that I loved, and writing and art have always been sort of the through line in my whole existence. And so I started to write little entries, like, and make little submissions to local newspapers and little area zines. And in that job, I was able to travel quite a lot. And so I would say, listen, I'll cover this music festival if you pay me. And so I would, and through this travel, I was either traveling back to New York City or I could travel, into other places. And I started to have this dual existence. And it took me over a year before I was able to make enough money cobbling together all this freelance work to quit my day job and be a freelance reporter. And this was at a time when I was really lucky. I had a lot of incredible editors who taught me the importance of each word. I was paid by the word oftentimes. And I
Wow.
had a lot of, I worked for like Monocle magazine and The Economist and Dazed and Confused, a lot of British magazines because they paid by the pound. And at the time, the pound was a lot better. But I had one editor who said, I used to send in, because this is pre-iPhone, I used to send in these little snap and shoots from this dinky camera that I had. And he said, you have an eye. If I invest in a camera for you, will you learn? And so I followed several of my friends in New York City around saying, I'll be your assistant for the day if you teach me. And so, I was really lucky that my friends let me kind of tag along, and I learned over time. And so I started to carve out this niche in New York City as a music and arts journalist. And I would say, pay me more than one person and less than two, and I'll shoot and write it. And this was at the time that digital was really coming into play. And I was like the youngest probably around. So they were like, throw her on the blog or figure out what a blog is. And so I started to kind of build this reputation as a bit of a blogger and to understand digital strategy. And I was covering like really indie music. There was a
Mhm.
time, I mean, that's laughable because, now I was covering like Diplo, who now is huge, but at the time, wasn't well known and was playing in tiny clubs, and a lot of amazing music coming out of Brooklyn, a lot of really obtuse electronic and hip hop. And then I got this weird email from Justin Timberlake's manager, which I thought was a mistake. I think one of the lessons I've learned is, especially the weird emails, like pursue them.
Yes. Oh, yes.
um, but they said, he's invested in a digital think tank, which is a fancy word for kind of incubator, and in San Francisco. And they're looking for somebody who really understands content, so can write and shoot and can edit and, really lend themselves strategically. And this is where it was interesting because my consultant background taught me a bunch of strategy. And so here
Mhm.
I was like completely, I don't know if what the title of that position was, but I end up moving with my best friend from New York, who's a musician, Paige, to San Francisco with no plan. We sat on a lawn in Dolores Park being like, where should we live? And we just took a plunge and ended up living with a bunch of artists in an artist loft, and being, coincidentally, this is 2009. So we were suddenly in this digital revolution where I remember we went to a party and this guy's DJing and he's like 22. And he said, you know what I did today? I created something that we're going to call status updates. And he worked at Facebook, and he was like, you're going to put like a smiley face or like a not smiley face. And I remember thinking, not so impressed.
Oh my
But it
gosh.
really shows how I just happened, to really follow this cultural zeitgeist and
Mhm.
end up in this scenario where at the time there were a lot of creatives, a lot of artists who were using coding to revolutionize, interaction and social habits and how we express ourselves. And then in 2011, I moved from San Francisco to LA. And I, at that point, had pitched Justin to invest in his own digital, to redo his website, which we used to care so much about websites. Because I said, I'll be your tour photographer and I'll also oversee all the content creation. We'll hire a videographer. We'll really go out, I think he was probably one of the first people or celebrities to musicians to invest in strong kind of digital
Wow.
strategy and content and media.
Mhm.
And so I ended up on his creative team where we came up with a lot of the visuals that coincided with his album, the 2020 experience. And at the time he was touring with Jay-Z, and, it was really wild. I got to travel the world, and we put out a book. I directed a music video, Can't Stop the Feeling, the first listen. And
Wow.
I just ended up, really,
Mhm.
again, in these interesting circumstances. And then in 2015, I came back from his tour and was quite bored. And I ended up starting a creative agency. Again, not really with a vision of, I had to ask other people what a creative agency was, but I was interested in using art to create communities and to storytell and make change. I really wanted to work with powerful humans who wanted, to express themselves and who were incredibly emboldened by different missions. And I wanted to work with more women after having worked with Justin,
Mhm.
for a long time and being like the only half Japanese hippie like on the team, female. I really wanted to explore that. And so my first client happened to be Reese Witherspoon, helped her sort of create this whole
Wow.
enterprise and launch her various businesses from fashion to Hello Sunshine. And, her revolution has been really interesting. I worked with Time's Up when that launched because I was really impassioned, to bring light to how women have been treated,
Mhm.
and to do that artfully as well, because, I think it's important to storytell in a manner that gets people's attention
Mhm.
and is honest and sincere. And so, yeah, I ended up working with so many different amazing humans, from Mindy Kaling to Chelsea Handler, and so many different companies. I ended up starting to work for companies who really wanted to have a human perspective. And again, with this idea around being an artist
Mhm.
through digital storytelling. And at the same time, in 2015, I had traveled to Nepal to rebuild homes. I pretty much will sign up for anything when I feel my heart responds to it. And there had been a really horrific earthquake. And I did a series from the people that I met there where I printed their portraits onto chiffon material and installed them and showcased that at Miami Art Basel that
Mhm.
year, and at Summit at Sea. And this was also in honor of Dan Fredenberg, who had passed away in that earthquake, and who was a Summit member. And so a group had gone to kind of in honor of him to help rebuild homes. And so while all of this work stuff is happening, I'm having, a real soulful kind of moving experience with the art side.
Mhm.
And, so I'm kind of, I think I've always been kind of balancing a lot of different hats at once. Fast forward, I fall in love, have two kids, end up during quarantine, so happy to finally be homebound after having traveled a lot and, just being out there. And I received an offer to, um, for my company, which was a small scale creative agency, to be bought and integrated with a bigger agency. And it was interesting because I had been going so much that I thought, wow, wouldn't it be interesting to have a bit of stability for once? And part of
Mhm.
this required, a contract to work for the company for 2 years. And I thought, that sounds great, actually, to be an employee for the first time, because I think there was also always at this point, I'd had many different junctures in my career and expressed myself in so many different mediums. But a lot of it was with this kind of starving artist mentality, or, not always knowing where the next check or client would come from, even though, like, in retrospect, I've been gainfully, I've just been going, going, going. And so,
Mhm.
um, anyway, so especially when you have like, finally,
Yeah.
this would be a really good thing. And so sold my company and then became an employee for a company called Blended Strategy, and really oversaw all their creative, which was so fun. We were doing these huge campaigns, working with a lot more brands, but also entertainers and musicians. But I did find myself, and I think it's like a lot of people throughout, COVID and the introspection that comes from that. I think there was a point, or maybe it had been happening for a while, but it's really easy when you have two kids to wake up, get them dressed, clothe them, food, out the door, figure out how to make sure that they're okay, work crazily, and
Mhm.
then put them to bed and then go to sleep and then do it again, and really kind of not take a moment of respite and a
Yeah.
rest or take a break, and not know that you miss that or need it. And so when was it? Last year, July, my husband, who had been on a television show, he's a TV and film editor. He had been on a show for 8 something years, and that show had just ended. And we just had this moment where I was sitting down and I was like, he's British, and we had a flight in July to go visit his parents in England and return, but they were ward travel. And I said, what if we cancel the return and just stay there for a bit?
Wow.
And,
Yeah.
um, I think a lot has changed. What's really interesting is, many people, there was the ability to work remote and to kind of rethink, what a lot of this looked like. And so we did that. And it ended up being 6 months away. His dad happened to have a heart attack around this time. And so we happened to be there while he was rehabilitating. And so
Mhm.
all these serendipitous things kind of happened, which proved that it was completely the best thing for every single member of our family. But when I finally, we're also quite fortunate. They live in like rural England, and so they're right by next to a farm. So there's geese and like big fields and lots of mud and a lot of quiet, And when I finally kind of slowed down, I realized I hadn't taken a break in, 20 plus years of this wild career of, especially when you're working it's a very fast pace, I think. And even I'd had 3 months maternity for my second child, but my first, I was like sending emails whilst in labor and
Oh
as
my
soon as
gosh.
out after a C-section, still doing it. And I'm sure many women can relate, but I also bought into, I think at that time, this whole, entrepreneur, female hustle, whatever, girl boss, kind of all of those things, which were like, you can do it all. And, it's the requirement, I feel like, for women is like, break the glass ceiling, but also like build the ceiling for your own family at the same time. Make
Yeah.
sure it's really well interior designed, and also do
Mhm.
that while you're looking really good. And
Exactly.
holding a baby in one arm and nursing another, and
Mhm.
also, zooming or something. Like I was
Exactly.
like, this is wild. And, we're not close to family where we are. And so just having that kind of community and just some space was really interesting. And when I slowed down, I realized that it felt like it made sense to take
Mm.
a different kind of break and hiatus and kind of vertical my career a bit. And so it was wild because when I came back this January, I didn't return to the, stability, I suppose,
Yeah.
of this agency. And instead, I am a full-time artist now, and I've really used that time. So back to the freelance slash,
Yeah.
um, I definitely think it is interesting because I'm also in my 40s now, and who knows,
Mhm.
right? Like, I think it's so wild I'm so excited to be able to take this time and at this point, stand in my power a bit and talk about myself, and to create work that I think is really important and
Mm.
meaningful. A lot of the flag installation work is intentionally meditative and to create safe spaces for humans to connect and walk through these flags and take time and drop their phones and chill. And in one of my installations, I did 5 from January till this time. Um, and one person fell asleep under them, and it was like one of my biggest honors. I was like,
Yeah.
my art
What a
is working.
compliment. I love it.
But
Oh.
yeah, so it's been a wild ride. But what I found is, now that I have time to really, and I think in order to do something really well, you do need to dedicate yourself to it. So while
Mhm.
you can have all of these paths to
Yeah.
really focus at what you are doing
Mhm.
at that time, I think I'm going to be working until I'm 80, happily, knock on
Mhm.
wood, if I make it that far. And so I think, yeah, I'm really excited for the next half, right, of this
Yeah.
existence, and how all of the things I've done in the past also are, helping develop this artist that I am now. Does that make sense? It's a
Yes,
lot.
I know, I love that, and something that stands out to me when you're talking about the trajectory of everything that you've done, what I hear is 2 very important things: intuition and action, the doing of it. And it sounds like you really deeply trusted your intuition as an artist and a creative on
Mm.
everything that you've ever kind of brought to life. Am I close? Is that
I
a big part of
love,
your
yes, I love intuition, but I also think what's interesting and why one of the huge takeaways of taking this break was we don't, in order to connect to that intuition and to
Mhm.
listen to yourself, you really do need to take time. And
Mm,
that can be a walk in your day if you have that luxury. I think, one of the biggest takeaways is I never intentionally valued taking a break. I thought of
Mm.
it as kind of perhaps something that didn't have the privilege, right, to take in the first place with two kids and all these things going.
Yeah.
Um, but that it can be, I look to that moment where we did as this quantum leap, where suddenly, everything changed.
Mhm.
And there were so many signs that, this was the right thing to do, even if it was maybe scary and not logical and like across the entire world or what have you. Um, but yeah, and I think I I don't know. I think intuition and knowing yourself and having those moments of deep listening is so critical. And so yes, to all of that, and to like developing that current and that
Mhm.
conversation with yourself and remembering it and listening when you can't hear your inner voice anymore. That means you need to go, go off somewhere into
Yeah.
nature and take some time.
Do you feel like the meditative nature of your flag installation is a reflection of that, like it's a physical place where people can actually take a break and slow down?
Yes, and that was it. It happened right when I started to really work, in a lot of the digital sphere where, and we talked about how the media landscape, and I think all the art that you create should reflect, the state of the world, right?
Mhm.
And a lot of what we're up against is this, in our lifetime, we've gone from having phones and email and social media and, this inundation of
Mhm.
information that's so tailored to you and
Mhm.
every whim, which
Yeah.
is wild
Yeah.
because at least, the generations before they had,
Mhm.
signs and posters and ads, but they weren't so tailored
Mhm.
and they weren't incessant. They weren't,
Yeah.
propelling you to spend every minute not listening to yourself and
Yeah.
not being amongst community, right?
Mhm.
But being on a screen. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, I think that definitely there was this kind of side to me that was like, hey, this is important. We need to pay attention. And then I think maybe concurrent with all of us,
Mhm. Mhm.
there's been totally, I think, a lot of people wanting to take a break and look at their lives differently and know that this stuff isn't good for you. And I
Yeah.
definitely want to be part of this community that's propelling that conversation.
Well, let's talk about the community part of that and how you use art and technology to connect and convene in community. Can you tell me a little bit about where the inspiration for it comes from, but also like where do the connection points like arise for you? Like where do you see the opportunity to really kind of build into that community?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because when you hear using art and technology,
Mhm.
I think that I'm very aware at the negative repercussions of
Mhm.
technology, and I seek to use it really consciously and purposefully.
Mhm.
And so, in my work, as a photographer, had been starting to layer images in Photoshop that were evocative of memory because I think
Mhm.
your memory is so much more. Colorful, and there's so many more layers and depth than just one image. And
Mhm.
so I started to create that. And then I wanted to print onto material so that I created a tactile experience where people needed to come, you need to come and see it and you need
Mhm.
to feel it. And then, the material is naturally meditative. So whether it's consciously or unconsciously, it's really good energy to be around. So
Yeah.
whether, it's on your wall or outside, to have, on my patio, I have some of my art and other prayer flags, which when I was in Nepal, I saw lots of Tibetan prayer flags, and that was one of the first impetuses for that first series
Mhm.
because they're called lungta and they have ancient mantras written on them. And the idea is as they blow in the wind, those intentions and prayers, go out into the universe. And so,
Mhm.
and they're also colored based off of, fire, earth, the various elements. And I think that then I got into research of flags and, the history, and they're so layered, right? And in lots of our history, they cause such division and insularity, right?
Mhm.
Especially if they've caused wars as well. But therefore, in this work, I really seek to unite everyone and to create safe spaces of unity and
Mhm.
people to come together, and so because it's a lot about mental health, and also a lot about identity. I lived a lot of different places growing up, and I'm half Japanese, but my grandfather's from Hawaii and my dad's a bunch of different um identities, and my mom grew up in Japan, and but then she went to an American school. And so I think I was born in Sydney, Australia. I've always been just really fascinated. I'm definitely a global citizen, but fascinated about how one comes to such identity.
Mhm.
And so I have started to team up with organizations here in Los Angeles. Because of my Japanese roots, I started a festival in Little Tokyo, um, and a flag series called Kibo Nobori. Kibo means hope, and
Mhm.
Nobori is flag. So the idea is to spread hope in the community. And it's in honor of Children's Day, which is a national festival in Japan in
Mhm.
May. And I thought, well, we have Mother's Day and Father's Day here in America. It would be amazing to bring this cultural tradition and festival
Mhm.
to Little Tokyo. And so I teamed up with Terasaki Budokan, which is a community center really dedicated, to nurturing the community in Little Tokyo, and bringing it to life with sports and festivals and activities. And Co-Market, which is a marketplace for AAPI creatives, we
Mhm.
teamed up and created this festival, and that's grown from, in 3 years, I don't know how many people, maybe 500 attended the first year, and this year 2,500. So
Wow.
it's become a real moment in May. And I have also done installations with the Asian Mental Health Project. And, again, there's this festival called Honor Your Feelings Fest. And it's really about being, especially in the Asian community. And I know growing up for myself, um, oftentimes you're told like
Mhm.
everything, save face, like, everything's okay, not to be very overt with your feelings and keep it in. And
Mhm.
so it's a really important and elemental kind of thing to honor your feelings and be open that it's happy or sad or all of the variety, right? And so it's been an honor to team up with them. I've created an installation at their festival for 2 years, and through that, I was just asked in this September to be part of a gallery show that is with this other artist called Shizuka, who is working with it's DMST Atelier. And we're going to have a show the second week of September. The opening is the second week of September through October. And that's all again through, community that was created in Little Tokyo, that's through artists and through, Shizuka is an incredible artist, and mother. And yes, so we're so excited. And all of these things are sort of serendipitously rolling
Mm.
into each other, which is how I know just to keep following it and kind of
Mhm.
creating.
I know, I love that. The serendipity of it all is the thing that I
Yeah.
feel like is one of the really striking things about everything that you're talking about. And do you feel like the serendipity of it like flows naturally from like a faith in yourself or like a listening to yourself, like the intuition part, or like where do you feel like that serendipity really flows from?
Well, yes. So my name is Faith Ann for a reason. So I definitely do, believe in forces outside of our control. And
Mhm.
I think faith can have a negative connotation at times, but I'm not talking about it from a certain religion, but from a just generally spiritualistic sense, and believing that that your intention goes a long way. I think I've practiced this over time. I have always journaled a lot. I started to be really purposeful with writing lists of goals and intentions, and each year that has helped incredibly. And what I've learned is like, okay, then you have to make them a little bigger, because I was like, I want to be in a book, and we did a book, and then some of it, it's just really interesting and wild how it can grow. But and I said gallery show, but I was thinking next year I'll be ready. And then I got a text from Shizuka, do you want to be in something in September? And I was like, oh my gosh, this is wild. Yes, because it makes me so,
Yeah.
I'm just going for it and kind of following that flow. So yes, I think you have to just pay attention though to those moments. And then I also think I'm often, when you're not following that. And I'm given like overt signs. Like as an example, I remember when I first did consulting, that scenario, the first day we had to do this computer training, kill me. And I was getting ready at like 6 in the morning because we had to be there early. And I was putting on this jacket suit thing, and I flung my arm out, and somehow I flung my arm out so that I sliced my extensor tendon on the lamp that was like this thin metal lamp.
Gosh.
And I didn't even notice because I was going so quick, and I'm in the elevator and I go like that, and I see like, bone.
Oh my
and my
goodness.
and my medical insurance started that day, because this is the first day of training. And so
Oh
thankfully
my
I
gosh.
had insurance, but I spent the next week in recuperation, getting behind this computer course that I wouldn't have known what I was doing anyway. And then I had to attend the rest of it like in this arm thing, like holder with my finger, it was just a total mess. But my point was, had I known and really followed that at that time, there was direct and quite obvious signs. This is not for you. Like if you're
Right.
trying to go to a web course in this like cast, but I do think, it takes living a bit to really kind of dial into yourself and to, have trust and all of that stuff.
Absolutely. So you mentioned in early on like a disconnect that you were experiencing in work that was just not aligned. And you've definitely like pivoted over the years and you started new careers. What is it that how do you make that leap? If you feel that disconnect, how do you how do you recommend to somebody to go, it can be scary, but it's doable. How do you take that leap?
So it's very interesting, because I think while I'm a risk taker for sure, I'm one of those like safe risk takers.
Mm.
So I think part of it is, everyone has grown up sort of probably with a variety of different challenges. And, there was a time I kicked my dad out of the house. I was raised by a single mom. There was a lot of pressure in the house. And for that reason, I think I've always needed to be very independent and take care of myself. I don't have a trust fund. I don't have backup a lot of the time, So, again, what I really recommend is to do research and to slowly like move towards that. So while I say to go take a break, when you're younger, I think it's so much easier, but don't take a break like move to the Bahamas and rack up a bunch of debt. Take a break. Like, do you know somebody who lives somewhere where they're open for you to spend
Yeah.
time there, right? Like when we left for 6 months, it really helped because we were able to find a family to rent the house who had 2 kids and didn't care that it was filled with toys and a mess, but that really helped, enable that transition. And even here now, the way that I've been able to become a full-time artist, and it took till I'm 40, which is wild, but it helped that I was able to sell my company, and I've been able to really save. I think that we've been at times quite frugal in ways that is smart. so that I don't have to, you know, be so stressed about every single month for this
Mhm.
first phase as I'm trying to get started. Those things all, it's like, you know, being an
Mhm.
artist, but also wearing a little bit of a logical hat and being
Mhm.
realistic, but also making connections and using the things around you to make it happen. Because I
Mhm.
do think anything is possible, but
Mhm.
you really have to like plan ahead and make it
Yeah.
happen slowly and safely, especially in the market today. Like, do not just suddenly go, you know, rogue.
Oh my gosh. This is something that I see all of the time, and it's like I used to see this a lot in like Facebook groups for people who were creative entrepreneurs or wanted to be creative entrepreneurs or full-time artists. And inevitably once a month there's somebody that always posts and is like, that's it, I'm quitting my job. I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to chase the dream. And everyone's commenting and they're like, yeah, go for it. You got this. Like cheering them on, which is great. We definitely need that. But I'm always the person that was like, how much savings do you have? Do you have an emergency fund?
Yeah,
Right?
you
Like,
need
what
an
are the
emergency.
steps?
Totally. But I
Mhm.
think that that's where Instagram really lets us down, and a lot
Mhm.
of this culture of this perfection that I think, you know, I got involved. I love a beautiful photo, I think. And, you know, I think that I did get really tired, or thus far, I've become quite tired of trying to market a product or trying to, you know,
Mhm.
pretend that somebody needs something that they don't.
Yeah.
But I think that that it's very easy to look at other people's lives and think this was so easy. And I'm
Mhm.
here to say, like, even though I've done many things, never was it easy.
Yeah.
um, I always, if I was trying to iterate and kind of move, I did so kind of over time so that, you know, like I had a soft landing.
Mm.
And I think that, you know, you have to make other sacrifices. So if it requires saving, then you can't go do a lot of those things that you might want to, but that might be worth it. Um, and it might take 10 years.
Yeah.
Realistically,
Yeah.
I think some of those like incredible stories that you read of that people just went straight to the top right away.
Mhm.
Yeah, but who were their parents? And like, did they have help along the entire route, or a ton of
Mhm.
funding, or who knows, you know, some kind of special safety net that we don't know about. But
Yeah.
if you don't, that's like most of us. And therefore, you know, little by little, but dream big and
Yeah.
go like the long,
Yeah.
fun route.
Yes. Oh, well, okay. So let's talk about that. One thing we want to talk about is like the art of reinvention. And I feel like
Mm,
for those big dreams, I feel like a part of being a full-time artist or full-time creative is like constantly reinventing yourself as your dreams get bigger and bigger so that you're turning yourself into the person you need to be in order to do the new thing, the next thing, the bigger goal. What do you think? What do you think that process is like when you think about that like upward angle?
interesting. I think it's interesting because a lot of when I was younger, I think I didn't write down, I
Mhm.
want to be here and I want this. I was very beautifully quite open and receptive, right?
Mhm.
But as I've gotten older and better with intention, I've really, you know, written things down, be really honest with also creating the environment around me that will propel me further and faster, and in a more healthy and holistic sense, right? I think for my whole 20s, in order to be a music and arts reporter, I was bopping around and like not sleeping a lot. And I think a lot of the entertainment world can be really unhealthy. And
Mhm.
maybe it was moving to California, maybe it was, you know, having children and what have you, but I definitely can't party like I used to. I need my sleep. I have been really getting onto this path of health and really optimizing, you know, my day to day. And health being also not doing every single thing under the sun, but being
Mhm.
really honest with how to, you know, set really good boundaries and leave the cell phone out of the bedroom and all
Mhm.
of those things. And I think that has helped me, again, listen to my inner voice,
Mhm.
be much more connected to where I'm going and what's important, you know, what I need to get there. Did that answer your question?
Yes, I love that. I love that. Do you feel like, in what ways do you give yourself permission to be like to do any sort of reinvention for yourself, or any sort of like, this is the new thing that I want to do, how do I show up for this? How do you write yourself a permission slip to do that? Or does that just feel like an inherent thing? Like, have you ever run up against like, ooh, can I do this? I don't know, this is new. What is that
Yeah.
like for you?
I mean, it's interesting because I think in this phase, it's finally stepping into my own light. And, the company that I had was called Mossy Creative. It was really to grow behind the scenes in shadow and like exponentially, but it was always quite secretive.
Mhm.
And in order to step into this light and to really talk about myself and create this art that, I think is deeply important for our world and,
Mhm.
in this time, it has required me to be really honest with myself and um to kind of, I think that there were reasons that I had to work with every artist under the sun before I was able to kind of, really be strong in myself. I think people are lying to you if they say they don't have any doubt. They might just fake it better.
Yeah.
But it takes
Yeah.
years and years. And for me, I wrote, again, I'm so into journaling and being, my husband thinks I'm wild because I have just like crates of journals over the years. But in there, it is also wild because I'll write places that I want to go, things I want to do, dreams I've had about installations or about, a photo series. And I've learned as I get better, I can dream bigger. And there was one exercise that I recently was listening to a podcast, and this artist professor said, write down 5 years from now exactly what you want your life to look like, but
Mhm.
do it in as big and lush of detail as you possibly can.
Mhm.
And so I did. And it's like, I need to have a studio and kind of, how I want to wake up and, you can dream and do and live whatever life you want.
Mhm.
But being really crystal clear with that and
Yeah.
what that looks like really helps you to then get there. What do you need then? Okay, in 5 years.
Yeah.
And sometimes also I've learned it takes longer than I think. So 5 years
Mhm.
really means 7 or 10 or whatever. And I'm okay with that too. Again, because I think we're gonna live longer than ever.
Mhm.
I really try to be as healthy as possible and treat people around me as kind and all of the things so that
Mhm.
we can have careers well into this time, I don't know, 40
Yeah.
years or now.
Yes.
So yeah, be focused, detailed, and then be okay with it taking far longer.
I love that. What's it like to go from behind the scenes to in front of the scenes? Is that a hard switch?
Oh my gosh. I don't really know yet because I just made this transition.
Mhm.
Um, my Instagram was totally private forever.
Mhm.
And, I think it's scary, not is scary even the right word, but I think, there's incredible safety being
Mhm.
in the shadows. And
Mhm.
there's also an incredible value. I was able to travel, and while, you know, Justin was in a hotel room in Rio and couldn't leave, I was able to kind of explore the entire city as much as I could in one day and come back. And the whole rest of the team would just have been in this one room. And
Mhm.
so I think I was able to absorb as much. I don't have any regrets in that sense of
Mhm.
how I started, but it has made me so excited, and I think especially as I think now as a mother,
Mhm.
I think a lot about the legacy that I want to live, or sorry, leave and live. And I think about really being proud of the work that I put out for my kids. And so there was a moment when years ago, my little son came in the room and I was photoshopping like the booty of a famous singer. And I had to close the screen and I was like, this is against everything I really believe in. And that was, when your work starts to not reflect kind of what you really believe and
Mhm.
the moral kind of compass, right?
Yeah.
You have to be really thoughtful with it. And so
Mhm.
that's where now I have less, like, I think it's really important to stand in the light and represent, a bunch of, I'm all about marginalized voices, giving
Mhm.
light there. I kind of think a lot of people are a little bit tired of voices of really famous, well-known, wealthy humans, right? I think that
Mhm.
there's this whole
Yeah.
wondrous world
Yeah.
of much more than that. So
Mhm.
yeah, so step in the light, and I want to step in the light with so many humans, right? It's
Oh,
not just about
yes.
me.
I love that. I love that. And it seems like that's been a big part of the success of it all for you is like for you, it's like you can see that you are always pulling people into the light with you. And that's so beautiful. I love that. The community of it all. It's amazing.
Yeah, I think Los Angeles has been really inspiring. I remember when I first moved here, a lot of my friends from New York were like, Los Angeles, it's so superficial and all of those things. And now all of them are moving here, first of
Hmm.
all. But
Yeah.
second, I think there's this melting pot.
Hmm.
I think we're at a place where we know that the world is very, very far from anything perfect. And
Hmm.
it's really important to create art that reflects the reality of
Hmm.
today and tries to change that. And so I'm so inspired by the different kind of organizations,
Hmm.
grassroots, artist driven companies,
Hmm.
and other humans in my own neighborhood
Hmm.
and in this land of dreams. And I'm excited to see where that goes.
Mm. Oh, I love that. And I think it's so, this is actually the second conversation today where I've talked about how much I love Los Angeles for artists. And like New York is amazing for artists too, but there's something about LA in terms of like the experimental, there's something that people are experimenting with. Like there's just like, nobody has any concept of limits. Like, let's just see how weird we can get with it. And I know that that's true for New York too, but I don't know. There's something about LA that I love LA artists so much, and I love LA so much.
It was especially interesting because there were many, in retrospect, I had this quantum leap by moving to the UK and being in nature and that kind of thing. But also
Mhm.
while there, I really realized that there's elements of the culture that I felt at least were much more conservative, right? And
Mhm.
when I started to think of, I was given the space to come up with these ideas in my head of installations and art series, but I really felt that I'd have to create them and that the place for them was here in Los Angeles.
Mhm.
And I think while we can be sort of, really hesitant and upset about the state of many things in America, at the
Mhm.
same time, as a woman, artist, and creative, the incredible amount of freedom that you have here to state what is going on and what you want to
Mhm.
say and
Mhm.
to walk the streets relatively um freely uh is nothing to take lightly and
Mhm.
definitely doesn't exist even in neighboring places. And so yeah,
Mhm.
I think it's amazing, and I think of that all the time.
Before I ask my last question of the day, tell people where they can find you and how they can experience your art and where to learn more about you.
Totally. So you can go to faithanyoung.com. That's my website. It's FAITH, like you got to have faith, ANNYOUNG, young, like not old. And my Instagram is Faith Ann Young as well. And sign up for my newsletter on my website. That would be great. Give me a follow. I'd love to hear from any of you LA creatives and creatives elsewhere. I think that it's important that we all connect and share each other's perspectives. And then lastly, yeah, I have a show upcoming in September with Shizuka Kusayanagi, and it is an artist-run gallery right by La Brea on Washington called DMST Atelier.
Yeah.
And so follow me on my website or on my Instagram for more information about that. And I'd love to see you guys there. And that'll be a really good kind of showcase of the work that I'm up to. Yeah, so
Awesome.
exciting.
And all of those links will be in the show notes for you guys for easy clicking. Okay, so my last question is my sliding doors question, which is
Oh, that's
basically to
September
ask
14th, by the way. Save the
September
date.
14th, and this episode will be out before then, so
Yay!
save the date.
Amazing. Come see me.
Okay, so what is one small thing that has happened in your life that has made such a big difference, whether or not you knew the small thing was going to become a big thing?
Oh my gosh. It's such a good question. And I think there's actually so many, definitely going to the UK. That was a bit of a lot of inclination was to just stay and not do that. and and that was pretty wild. And then changed and verticaled, right? All of my family's paths, but particularly my own into this new phase. But also, I met my husband through not wanting to go on a date and, having to be cajoled by one of my friends and finally going, and the rest is history. And I moved to, San Francisco on a whim, leaving my entire apartment in New York City fully furnished,
Oh my
thinking I would be
gosh.
back in a few months, just really hedging. And then it was years later till I came back and got everything from my apartment. I luckily found a guy who was fine with living with all my stuff, which was wild. But again, all of those things, I mean, what a wild, wild existence. And yeah, just keep
Amazing.
doing it,
It's funny
going
how
for it.
even the small things, like some things you just like never think are gonna make any difference, and then it's the whole difference in the trajectory of life. I love that. That's so
Yeah,
cool.
and you have a feeling, right? Like there was even,
Mhm.
I was on a plane back from Miami or Basel, and next to me, there were two younger humans, and we started a conversation, and I liked both of them so much, I offered them jobs. I'm not like,
That's
and
so
it didn't work out with
cool.
one, but then the other became like my assistant for a while. And I'm just so open. And I think that all of those, you get this feeling of
Mhm.
serendipity, and it's this beautiful kind of like fluttering.
I
And
love
I
that.
think then you go for it. Yeah.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. This was
Yay.
incredible. I cannot wait for this episode to come out. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Paige, and all you're doing for creatives. It's so inspiring, and I'm honored to be part of the community.
Thank you.